You'd think she was a slave, the way her mother treats her. It's hard to believe they're related, Derek said as he kicked a pebble across the drying sand. Aiden's short legs struggled to keep up with his human friend. He stretched his jaws wide in a toothy yawn and agreed. Yeah, I know the truth. Orla, in all her horrible high and mightiness, stole Willow from some unsuspecting family for fear that her own spawn would be too ugly to be accepted in society. Or maybe she just ate the poor girl's former parents. You don't get that fat eating berries. Trust me, I would know. The round little dragon rubbed his belly, then stopped in his three-toed tracks. Which reminds me, I'm hungry. We ate not an hour ago, Derek laughed. So, is it my fault you're stingy with the helpings? Aiden flapped his flightless pair of wings to catch up. The boy and his dragon crossed the beach on the eastern side of the cliffs that lined Croax. They were approaching the tail end of the White-Tooth Mountains, a rocky area that the pair loved to visit and had endlessly explored. They eventually reached the foot of White Sail Point, where the two had spent countless sunrises staring out across Rydia's widest ocean, the Calcane. But this particular morning felt different. Derek had the sensation that something dreadful had happened, and the once clean air seemed tainted somehow. But after a moment, he shook the feeling off and set to scaling the ridge. Coming? Derek asked his friend impatiently. Aiden had paused as if sensing something himself, then outstretched his short, bat-like wings, and with a kick, he lifted himself into the air. As an adolescent dragon, Aiden had yet to develop the necessary span or strength to soar in the sky. But as he himself would say, maybe I can't fly, but I can float. The season's updrafts allowed him a clever combination of gliding and climbing to the top of the ridge. Hair damp with sweat and a face full of dust, Derek pulled himself onto the flat of a narrow ledge that protruded from the sheer side of a cliff. Aiden had reached the same spot earlier, but stopped to pop a few pillar beetles in his mouth until his friend could catch up. Derek made a disgusted face, then turned to take in the miles of breathtaking scenery that stretched out before them. He took a long inhale of the ocean breeze, which blew soothingly through his auburn hair. This is a beautiful world. It's just begging to be explored. Someday, Aiden, we'll do it together. What is this wee stuff? Aiden said, shaking his head. He could never understand Derek's unhealthy human need for excitement and adventure, or something he would call looking for trouble. The unusual feeling that had crept up on Derek was replaced by awe and reverence as he gazed upon the awesome expanse. Rydia was most certainly filled with stories and treasures unknown. Thick forests, distant but majestic mountains, and the enormous sea stretched off into the horizon. As he leaned out from the tiny ledge, Derek felt so small and insignificant within the great land that all others lived, a mere speck of dust in an infinite universe. He had no idea how right he was. We gonna make it to the top before lunch, or what? Aiden barked, snapping Derek out of his trance. What? Aiden's tummy grumbled. Now I'm getting hangry. You know, that's like when you're really, really hungry, but only specifically for ham. Sure. Yeah, I guess we should hurry. Derek stopped mid-sentence to find a tear in his crimson cloak. It was the cape he was supposedly found in just after he was born. Whether it truly was a gift from his real father or just a nice story to tell himself, Derek was never sure. But it was important to him nonetheless, the only link to a lineage that even his surrogate father knew nothing about. Damn, this useless thing tore on my knife again. Your father would be hurt to hear you say that. I don't even know my father. Besides a head full of questions, this is all he ever left me, remember? Derek's tone turned somber. But isn't that why it's so special? Aiden offered. Derek fell silent. I know, I still don't understand why someone would abandon a child. Neither do I, Aiden said to comfort him, sharing his friend's pain. Aiden, too, was born with his parents unknown. Gregory had been a true father to them both, raising the strangest pair of brothers anyone in Croax had ever seen, and stranger still to the wider world than either of them could know. Hey, at least it's not just a human thing. We got each other, right? That's enough. At least until you and Willow start popping out babies. For the Lord's sake, Aiden, we're not going to start popping out anything. We're friends. Derek untangled the knife and sheathed it in his boot. Uh-huh. Well, for a would-be swordsman, you're pretty clumsy with that thing. Maybe it's for the best, Aiden jabbed. Derek turned to his small green friend with a smirk. Oh, you think so? Let's see how fast I can gut that overstuffed belly of yours. Don't joke about that. I need my belly right where it is, for balance. And who are you calling overstuffed? I'm properly plump, Thank you very much, Aiden grinned. After further climbing, Derek and Aiden reached the peak of the ridge known as White Sail Point. The cliff gained its name from a group of early Reichstein explorers, the original Elven people. Though they were not considered as clever or as sophisticated as their dwindling successors, the Elven culture was known throughout history for leading great sea expeditions. As the story goes, in many centuries past, on the first true day of spring, 12 red-sailed ships set out in search of new lands. 6 traveled to the east and 6 to the west, as most of the northern lands had already been discovered. The 6 ships that sailed west soon found the southern peninsula of Alugar, and they made it their home. But those who wandered east were thought to have been lost at sea. Nearly a year passed, and one night, the group that inhabited Alugar took to arms upon a scout's report that a number of white-sailed ships were heading for their land under the cover of darkness. At once, the elven colony prepared to defend themselves, and when the enemy landed, these newcomers found themselves immediately under attack. Of course, this lasted only until the soldiers from both sides realized that they'd been slaughtering their own people. The colony quickly discovered that these were, in fact, the lost sister ships who had set sail eastward from Reichstia. But somehow, 11 months later, they had ended up on the opposite side of the peninsula that the first group had colonized. And the second set of ships had not been recognized due to the unusual white sails, a symbol of death in Elven culture. The white sails had been installed to help their boats watch over one another during violent mid-sea storms. So, a short time after this ridiculous scenario, the Emperor of the Elves decided that this ordeal had become an embarrassment to their race, and they all left the continent of Alugar, forbidding their kind ever to return, or even to speak of it again. Thus, the area was named White Sail Point, and the world was finally discovered to be round. Aiden, wait up! Let me rest a minute. Derek stopped to lean against a boulder, shaking the sand and some small, painful rocks out of his boots. I haven't even broken a sweat yet, Aiden yawned. It's a mystery to me how you keep that bottomless belly airborne, Derek jabbed. What's with you? You've been moodier than a moonstone all day, and suddenly you got a problem with my healthy appetite? Did Orla hex you or something? I happen to have very reasonable dietary habits for a growing boy. Of my kind. And you could stand to put on a few pounds yourself, you twig-legged Lothario. Derek? Aiden realized Derek's attention had shifted to something on the horizon. Aiden's gaze followed. He squinted to see something moving very slowly across the sky, obscured by the glare of Rydia's rising sun. It was difficult to make out any detail at that distance, but the creature had a vague human shape and was held aloft on wings at least twice its length, which was an unusual sight to say the least. In fact, Derek knew it was impossible. This was not a man, nor a bird, but it hovered far too high above the ocean to be anything other than, well, whatever it was, it gave him a pit in his stomach. What is it? Aiden wondered aloud. The pair watched until a veil of cloud passed over and the creature fell out of sight. Well, forest trolls don't walk on clouds, that's all I know, Derek shrugged. Aiden's eyes bulged. Wait, are you saying it's a dragon? A real dragon? I've never seen a dragon before. Aiden leapt into the air, spinning. You're a dragon, you idiot. Derek laughed dismissively. Oh, I'm sorry, my great and all-knowing king of the know-it-alls, but what I mean is I've never seen another dragon before, and I'm not so sure I want to. Once, in the Hall of Stories, Mistel told me of a great red that torched an entire village in a single breath, and it was winter time. Do you have any idea how much ham I'd have to eat just to work up a decent fire burp? Aiden. And then there's the story of Ash, the black ice dragon from Nord Keep, whose shriek can shake the earth and shatter frozen lakes. The adolescent dragon rattled on in excitement. Aiden, is Ash a descendant of Shivar? Dragons live pretty much forever, after all, and of course, I know we all come from the Trinity, but... Oh, we should invite, whoever that is, to the Day of Dragonfire celebration this year. Imagine having a real dragon on the Day of Dragonfire. I mean, I know I'm real, but I haven't even grown into my scales yet. Aiden! Derek snapped. It's not a dragon. Aiden's ears dropped. He was clearly not used to being yelled at by anyone, let alone his closest friend. It's just not. Dragons haven't been seen in Alugar for lifetimes. Besides you, okay? We know this from Gregory and Mistel's stories and from the rangers in the Northlands. No one has seen a fully grown dragon since long before any of us were born. I don't know what that was, but It's not a dragon. Aiden fell sullenly silent. Derek wasn't sure why he snapped, or why he felt so certain that what they had seen could not have been a cousin or kin to his little friend, but deep down he was afraid. He feared that one day, too soon in Aiden's life, where dragons live for eons, that his dragon brother would leave him, and that their friendship would fade from memory. In the stories of old, dragons, dwarves, and elves do not befriend humankind. Their lifespans are too short, and their tales too easily forgotten. Derek attempted an apology. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shout. I don't know why I'm so... You're just not going to find any other dragons living in Croaix, Aiden. You're unique. With a sigh, Aiden hoisted himself up onto another ledge and glanced back. You mean alone? Derek had hit a nerve and regretted it. Aiden, I... See you at the top. Aiden's stumpy green tail slid out of sight. Derek was utterly disappointed in himself. He had been hard on his friend of late. His own unpredictable emotions got the better of him far too often. In fact, half the time Derek couldn't tell how he felt about anything, except Willow. But he'd find a way to make it up to Aiden. They tended to resolve their fights easily, and even more easily when food was involved. And Derek suddenly remembered he had some jerky in his pouch. Oh, hey, Aiden! I forgot! I brought us some snacks! As Derek held up the dried meat, the narrow outcropping on which he stood gave way. In a split second, he found himself lying on his side, ribs bruised and hanging halfway off of a much lower ledge. He swung his arms out frantically, fumbling for something to grab onto. A handful of twisted grass roots passed beneath his fingers, but as he tried to take hold, the rock collapsed. Derek's cry echoed out, but Aiden could not hear it. He had climbed and flapped his way too high, finally reaching the very peak of Whitesail Point. As usual, he confided in himself for sage advice. I'm okay with being alone. I like being alone. I like me. There's no other me like me, and I'm fine with that. Stupid Derek and his stupid human emotions. I'm glad I'm a dragon. Don't have to deal with things like jealousy or falling in love or stupidity. Aiden grumbled as he sat on a flattened boulder that usually served as their lunch spot. It overlooked both sides of the narrow peninsula. On Aiden's left was a thick forest below, which wrapped itself around the tiny human town that was his safe and familiar home. And on his right was the Calcane, nothing but whitecaps and the white-knuckling unknown. I just don't favor the idea of being the only one of my kind I'll ever get to know. One day Derek is gonna go and grow a big, disgusting beard, marry Willow, have a whole bunch of little baby Dereks. Aiden pushed a few pebbles around with his tail, staging out the imagined scene of Derek's future life. And what will I be doing? Playing uncle and babysitting a bunch of spoiled brats. I'll end up being a nursemaid. Ugh. And then Derek will die, and Willow will die, and their kids will grow up and have kids and die. Aiden's tail had gathered a pile of stones as large as his clawed feet. He stared at them in bewilderment. And I will live to see and be a nursemaid to them all. No, it's worse. I'll likely turn into a cranky old mother figure. I'll be like... He jumped back in horror, his collection of rock people scattered. Like Orla! Aiden's fear of being the last dragon on Rydia vanished. A new and much more terrifying fear had taken its place. No, I will not let you ruin my life by ruining your life, my half-witted human brother. I will save you. Derek, I'm coming!